Coming to you from the mountains and the plain. The only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Otto.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. My name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto. And it's Friday.
Today we're going to be...
Max,
it's Friday. Happy Friday. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
I've been dealing with puppy stuff all morning, so that's been annoying. But happy Friday. It's Friday. Fridays are great. We're going to be talking today about what's going on in Pennsylvania. This Pennsylvania State Supreme Court ruling yesterday, basically tossing out whole swaths of the state's election laws to make room for mail-in voting and all that. We're going to be talking about that, talking about how radical it is. We're going to be going piece by piece through the actual ruling, reading it off and explaining it. We're going to do that. But before I do that, I want to cover what's been going on at Fox News. Today's episode was almost going to be, Joe, about whether it's time to turn Fox News off. But I feel like the Pennsylvania story we have to cover that. But I do want to cover this because this happened on Fox News this week where Newt Gingrich was on trying to talk about how George Soros funded district attorneys around the country tend to be the ones letting the rioters and the looters out of jail on low bail and low bonds. And he was shouted down almost by Marie Harf and by other Fox News anchors. I want to play that, and then we'll play the apology, the really milquetoast apology that we got the following day. So let's go ahead first and play cut one.
Destroyed by this violence.
Yeah, it's so true. They represent everybody, right? Speaker Gingrich, I know you have a final thought for us.
Yeah, look, the number one problem in almost all these cities is George Soros elected left-wing, anti-police, pro-criminal district attorneys who refuse to keep people locked up. Just yesterday, they put somebody back on the street who's wanted for 2 different murders in New York City. You cannot solve this problem, and both Harris and Biden have talked very proudly about what they call progressive district attorneys. Progressive district attorneys are anti-police, pro-criminal, and overwhelmingly elected with George Soros's money, and they're a major cause of the violence we're seeing because they keep putting the violent criminals back on the street.
I'm not sure we need to bring George Soros into this.
I was going to say you'd get the last word, Speaker.
He paid for it. I mean, why can't we discuss the fact that millions of dollars he spent?
I agree with Melissa. George Soros doesn't need to be a part of this conversation.
Okay.
What? Why?
So it's for both.
All right, we're going to... Okay, we're going to move on.
Silence.
A historic day at the White House. We covered it from stem to stem.
All right, so we wanted to play that out in full because that happened on Fox News this week.
Wow.
Newt Gingrich, the former Speaker of the House, was calling to everyone's attention that many of the district attorneys who are letting the rioters out on low bail, who are refusing to prosecute rioters, looters, criminals, demanding the criminal justice reform, many of them have collected a lot of campaign contributions from organizations that George Soros funds. But the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, was told to stop by Marie Harf. Anyone who doesn't know Marie Harf, she worked in the Obama State Department.
Well, there you go.
She jumped right in and said, no, we don't need to be talking about George Soros and how he's funding the DAs in their race.
Yeah, let's the swamp and the deep state. There you go. She's part of it.
So the reason that the leftists say you're not allowed to talk about George Soros is because George Soros is Jewish. And they claim that any criticism of George Soros and what he does with his money is in some way anti-Semitic, which isn't true at all. Right? I don't care anything about his ethnicity, his race. I don't care. His religion. I don't care. What I care about is that he's funneling money into organizations that are trying to erode the United States and erode what makes America great.
And he's not an American. And he's not an American.
And yeah, he's not American. He pushes his agendas here on the U.S.
And he's not an American. There you go.
It's very disturbing because we see this across the board on other channels where you're not allowed to talk about certain things. And to see that happen to Newt Gingrich, and he's almost shouted down by, and I just have to fact check us, he is American, but he has dual citizenship for Hungary and the United States. I want to make sure that we don't get fact checked.
He was not born here in America.
No, but he is an American citizen.
Okay. But what I'm saying
is an American citizen.
Okay, all right. So he's an American citizen that is not less than one generation, right? Brought his radical ideology here to the United States and is actually funding the destruction of the United States from within.
Yeah. So
I stand corrected.
Let's play Fox News's apology because it was possibly one of the worst apologies you could get. Let's go ahead and play it. Cut 2.
So we had a little incident on the show yesterday that was not smooth. And while I was leading that segment, we had interruptions, and I sat silently while all of that played out. Also not ideal. Our guest, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, who is beloved and needed to be allowed to speak with the openness and respect that the show is all about, was interrupted. Do we debate with fire here? Yes. But we must also give each other the space to express ourselves. As the only original member of the 6-year-old amazing daytime ride known as Outnumbered, I especially want to rock and roll with every voice and perspective at the table. We don't censor on this show, and that's why we're winning weekdays at noon.
Yeah, no, they're starting to lose. I turn it off. I don't watch this anymore. They've given Marie Harf a platform. She was the one in the State Department covering up a lot of the really nasty stuff the Obama administration was doing. She was out there every day peddling fake news. They're giving her a voice. And you notice that she wasn't the only person on the couch. They're not actually using their couch anymore. They're using virtual. Marie Harf wasn't the only person criticizing Newt Gingrich for bringing up George Soros. There were multiple people on that panel saying, no, we don't talk about that. And you heard Newt Gingrich say, "What? I guess it's verboten. I guess it's forbidden." Very, very sad. I mean, Fox News has fallen way, way lower than I ever thought possible.
Well, I don't know if
trace
it's
a lot
Fox
of it back.
News. All right, I'm gonna argue with you here, right? So Fox News has always had dissenting opinions. They've always even had liberal commentators, and I think one of the things that I've always appreciated about Fox is that they're willing to listen to both sides. They're willing to have people on there that have varying opinions. So although I tell you that I don't, that particular segment to me was a little bit astonishing, more so because nobody piped up and told the other one enough is enough, right? Right?
Except we can trace a lot of this move to the left back directly to when Paul Ryan joined Fox Corporation's board. Mm-hmm. And where other people have come out to the press and said that Paul Ryan says he wants to use his position on the board to rein in Trump and to do something about Trump and his voters. It's very easy to trace this back. It's not just that. I was pulling up other clips, but I'm not going to spend the whole hour today. Anyone who watches Fox religiously can tell that there has been a shift to the left. You saw that with Shepard Smith, and he was forced out because people stopped watching his show. You see that with people like Marie Harf. You see what they do with Tucker Carlson, with trying to stop him from saying certain things. I love Tucker. He actually brought someone on immediately after this to talk about George Soros funding the DA. So the nighttime shows are great. It's the daytime shows that have always been more left-wing. And since Paul Ryan's been added to the board, no surprise, you have this never Trump, anti-Trump message starting to permeate even more. So leave a comment in the comment section whether or not you think Fox has moved to the left or not. I notice it. I think they have. Leave a comment in the comment section whether you believe that that's true. And I'm also going to put up a poll because today we're talking about what's going on in Pennsylvania with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Putting up a poll. Very simple. Do you trust mail-in voting? Yes or no? And that's it's multiple parts. Do you trust mail-in voting to handle your mail? And do you trust mail-in voting to be accurate in determining who should be the next president of the United States? Put the poll up on Facebook. Go ahead and take the poll. Want to remind everyone, make sure that if you haven't already, like the video on Facebook, hit the share button. And on YouTube, make sure that you give us a thumbs up. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit the bell for notifications. Also, I'm gonna ask everyone. We do have audio versions of the podcast, which we tend to advertise towards the end of the show. On most of our audio listens come from Apple Podcasts, and there's a way for you to review our podcast on Apple Podcasts. Right now, we have a 4.3 out of 5 stars, which
if
is
you
great.
like it. If you like it.
But yeah,
we're
if
actually
you like
one
it,
of the
but
highest rated conservative shows out there. It's us and Ben Shapiro.
We have a lot of trolls starting to give us 1-star reviews. Not a ton, but they are building up. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the link for you and put it in the comment section. If you want to go and you have an iPhone, it's very easy if you have an iPhone. Go to that link I just put in the comment section. I'll pin it. Go to that link, leave us a good review, and help us get higher up in those rankings. Okay, so let's get into this. What happened yesterday? The Pennsylvania State Supreme Court released 2 opinions. Not 1, but 2. The first one was to kick the Green Party's candidate off of the ballot. Now, Democrats hate when Green Party candidates are on the ballot because Green Party candidates attract liberal voters who would otherwise, Joe, vote for Democrats.
Right.
There was a push to get the Green Party candidate, I apologize, I don't know the person's name. She's not Jill Stein this time. To get the Green Party candidate kicked off the ballot. And because of a couple of technicalities, the Supreme Court for the state of Pennsylvania agreed, and the Green Party candidate will no longer be on the ballot.
It's Howie Hawkins.
Howie Hawkins, okay.
Yeah.
I think it is stunning that for a party that claims to be in support of free, open, and fair elections, that they are the ones racing around the country trying to get people kicked off of ballots. It's not just the Green Party in Pennsylvania. It's also Kanye West. Kanye West is trying to get on ballots, and Democrats are racing around the country trying to kick him off the ballots because they're terrified he will siphon African-American votes towards him, something that they assume would otherwise go to them. So really, really scummy. I'm actually shocked that Democrats are able to get away with this, but the media isn't covering it in that perspective, which is why I think it's so important for us to do so.
So Democrats, by the way, always say that they're for justice, always say that they're for equality, always say that they're for helping people. Here's maybe somebody in the comments or somebody could call in. By the way, if you want to call in and have a conversation with us, 888-441-1121. They always say that they're pro doing good, right? Name one community, one Democrat-controlled community that has not declined since a Democrat got in office. Just name one.
Yeah, you can't. You can't do it.
There's actually a city in Maine which was Republican that turned Democrat, right? And I'll try to find it sometime as we start playing videos. That the crime rate over a 5-year period of time went up like 700%.
Yeah.
I mean, and look, I'll listen to reason. If the Democrats actually stand for something that's good for the community, please tell me what it is. And I'm willing to listen. If what they do and what they stand for is so good, then show it to me. Show me some way that the Democrats actually come into a community and actually help it.
So they love to talk about how Republicans are the ones trying to steal the election. Yeah. Republicans are filing lawsuits challenging how ballots are collected, when ballots are collected, who ballots automatically get sent to. Democrats are running around the country trying to kick people off of the ballot.
Right.
I think it's a stark contrast because the Republicans are leading from the perspective of we don't want fraud, we don't want abuse, we don't want miscounted votes, right? We don't want any of that. Democrats are running around the country and saying we don't want you to have an option. We don't want liberals to be able to vote for the Green Party in Pennsylvania, a state, by the way, that Donald Trump in 2016 only won by 44,000 votes. Narrow margin. It was the narrowest margin for victory for a presidential candidate in Pennsylvania going back over 170 years.
So how can they take the Green Party candidate off the ballot? How can you?
They said there were technicalities. I think it was something related to things were faxed instead of hand delivered and hand included. Technicalities like that. And the Supreme Court ruled on the merits and said, no, and it's very easy in Pennsylvania to get on the ballot. You only need 5,000 signatures, something like that. Right. It's actually relatively easy. Same with Kanye West. I believe it was Wisconsin. His employees are walking into the building, and I think they get stuck in a doorway, stuck in an elevator. They end up getting to the actual office to hand in the ballots, and by the time they hand them over to them, they're like a couple minutes past the deadline. And that court said, nope, you're after the deadline, you're done. But as we're going to see in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, they actually just yesterday issued a ruling extending ballot collection for 3 days after the election. So if you're Kanye West and you're a couple minutes late, Democrats will fight tooth and nail to stop and put you on the ballot from going on the ballot. But in Pennsylvania, a state that they desperately need to win, it was narrow margins. They say, oh, no, you have to ignore the deadline. The deadline is, sure, it's written in the statute, but we have a pandemic. Hey, that's big. And the amazing thing with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is they're unapologetically political. They are Republicans and there are Democrats.
They're legislating through the judicial branch, which they're not supposed to be doing, right? And that's basically what they're doing.
And beyond that, they actually are political. There are Democrats and there are Republicans. It's not like the Supreme Court where they say, oh, well, they're not really one party or another. They're liberals or conservatives. On the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, there are Democrats and there are Republicans. And the PA highest court, they have a 5-2 majority Democrats over Republicans. So when you see a Democrat-run state Supreme Court issue a ruling that undoubtedly helps Democrats over Republicans, you start really asking these questions. So I want to go into the actual details of the court ruling. So let's go ahead and put up image 1. Image 1. This is actually from the petition. And let's keep it up for a little bit, Mr. Producer. This is dealing with the deadline. This is dealing with the deadline. It's dealing with how a ballot is turned in, where a ballot is turned in. I'll go ahead and read it for anyone who's listening. Count 1 of the petition for review. The statutory provision, which is entitled Voting by Mail-in Elector, states as follows. At any time after receiving an official mail-in ballot, but on or before 8 o'clock p.m. the day of the primary or election, the mail-in elector shall in secret proceed to mark the ballot only in black lead pencil, indelible pencil, or blue-black ink, in fountain pen or ballpoint pen, and then fold the ballot, enclose, and securely seal the same in the envelope on which is printed, stamped, or endorsed official election ballot. This envelope shall then be placed in the second one on which is printed the form of declaration of the elector and the address of the elector's county board of election and the local election district of the elector. The elector shall then fill out, date, and sign the declaration printed on such envelope. Such envelope shall then be securely sealed, and the elector shall send same by mail, postage prepaid, except where franked, or deliver it in person to said county board of election. I wanted to read that out because that's what the law says. It has to be turned in by 8 p.m. on the day of the election. It has to be written in ink, it has to be sealed in the proper envelope, and it has to have the address of the county election commission, right? The address where they're supposed to be turning it in. Practically every single part of that is about to be overturned, as we're going to talk about, by the state Supreme Court. They're getting rid of the deadline. They're getting rid of how you have to sign it. They're getting rid of where you have to send it. You can't
actually legally do that. I mean, and this is my
well, they can.
My issue.
They're Supreme Court. They can do what they want.
So then you could take it to the next level, which is take it to the U.S. Supreme Court.
And when you get that done in 56 days, that's the problem. They're coming down with this. 56 days, ballots have to be sent out. This is talking about mail-in ballots, right? There's no time. And this is what Democrats are great at doing. They file their lawsuits and they get the rulings they need right before an absolute deadline. They can't wait any longer to print ballots and to send them out. That's why they were fighting so hard to get the Green Party candidate kicked off. Because if they didn't get that ruling soon, she would be included on the mail-in ballots and she'd have to be included on all of them. So yeah, in theory, we could go to the United States Supreme Court. But are they going to issue a ruling in time? Highly doubtful.
I think you have to try. I think that
we definitely have to try.
I think the basis behind it is that you have to try to get it on the ballot. I mean, in my opinion, I think you have to try. Not on the ballot. You have to try to get this in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, right? You have to. I mean, I hope they are. I mean, I think the lawyers are probably just shaking their head like, I can't believe the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania actually did that. Yeah.
So Mr. Producer, let's go ahead and put image number one up again. I want to read the bottom section, and that's going to go into image 2. The last sentence of this provision is the primary focus of the first question of law that we will address. The plain language of this section allows an elector to mail her securely sealed envelope containing the elector's official election ballot to, now let's go to image number 2, her county board of election or, more relevant to this issue, deliver in person to said county board of election. In count 1 of its preview for review, petitioner, which in this case are the people trying to overturn that requirement, seeks a declaration that a reasonable interpretation of section 3150.16a of the election code permits county boards of election to provide electors with as many securely and easily accessible locations to deliver personally their mail-in ballots as each board deems appropriate. Petitioner suggests that these locations consist of mobile or temporary collection sites, and that county boards of election may utilize secure drop boxes for the collection of hand-delivered mail-in ballots. That is the big question of the first one, because if we you don't have to put it up again, but if you looked at that first statute that we read, one of the requirements is that the voter on this absentee ballot has to write, quote, the address of the elector's county board of election and the local election district of the elector. The statute is written in a way that there's supposed to just be a location. It's a location that's set in stone, and that's where it has to be sent to.
Right.
You can't write. It's unreasonable to suggest that someone should write down cardboard box sitting on the corner of Main Street and First, right? The statute isn't written in a way to suggest that hundreds of temporary locations would be possible. But the state Supreme Court decided that it is anyway. And the reason why is stunning. They said it's because it's ambiguous. Let's put up image 3. Turning to our analysis, we observe that the question before us consists of the following two-part query regarding the election code. Does the election code allow a Pennsylvania voter to deliver her mail-in ballot in person to a location other than the established office address of her county's board of election? And if so, what means can county boards of election utilize to accept hand-delivered mail-in ballots? For the reasons that follow, we find that the parties' competing interpretation of the election code on this issue are reasonable, rendering the code ambiguous as it relates to this query. It's a really important part, because what the Supreme Court just said is the Trump administration lawyers, the lawyers arguing against this, they basically said their argument is valid. The idea that the statute isn't written in a way just to allow as many Dropbox locations as possible. But they're saying that we also find the other side a valid interpretation too, which means because they're both valid interpretations, we get to decide which way it is. And that's what the state Supreme Court did. They said they actually
politicized the entire process, and they did exactly what the entire Constitution, what the entire country is designed to work against, and that is to have corruption leak into and create opportunity for, failing.
Chaos.
I'm sorry?
Chaos, opportunity for chaos. I mean, it's incredible. The ruling itself says that because we find the argument against this to have merit, we now get to interpret it on our own, because that means it's ambiguous. And when things are ambiguous, the state Supreme Court gets to weigh in and decide. Really, really weird, because usually you have two sides that go before a court and they both argue, and the court says, oh, we find that this side is right and we rule on that side. In this case, the state Supreme Court actually said we find that the Republicans' argument has merit, but because it has merit, that means that the two sides, it's like offsetting penalties in football, right? The two arguments offset, we get to decide how it goes. So what did the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania decide? They decided that even though historically you've had to drop it off to a brick and mortar location, because of the pandemic, they're going to let county boards of elections set up as many drop boxes as possible, without any standards for how secure they have to be. They're going to have tons of just drop boxes. And it's up to all of us just to pray that the ballots that get put in the drop boxes don't get destroyed, stolen, altered, or whatnot. That's what the state Supreme Court said
yesterday. I think that if they set up, let's say that they set up 100, first of all, they have to publish those locations, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So they have to publish those locations. I think that what we need to have happen then is we need to get volunteers that literally watch those locations all day long with a camera going. And as soon as those locations actually close up and grab those ballots, wherever they go, we have somebody follow them to where the ballots are dropped off. That's the only way that you can make that work.
Here's the problem. Mr. Producer, let's go ahead and put up my screen. The problem is that the Democrats anticipated that. Republicans were challenging on the basis. So just as a bit of an explanation, Pennsylvania, I believe it was last year, passed a law that says in order to be a poll watcher, the thing you're talking about, in order to be a legally recognized poll watcher and all of the protections that comes with, you have to be a resident of the county in which you want to watch the results. What does that mean? That means that, Joe, if you want to watch how ballots are collected in Philadelphia, you have to be a resident of that county.
Right.
You cannot be you cannot live one step past the county line. You have to be in that county. That makes it more difficult for people for Republicans to find poll watchers, because they actually have to, especially when you get to these rural counties, it's a little bit more difficult. You can't just send lawyers from out of state in to watch things. You need to find someone in the county. And that was challenged. And the state Supreme Court upheld it as saying that there's nothing unconstitutional about requiring that poll watchers live in the county. So, excellent idea, but unfortunately, there is already a law in place that's going to make that very, very difficult. You can go ahead and take that off the screen, Mr. Producer.
Why would they have a law like that? And this gets down to common sense, right? It really does get down to common sense. I want to ask the listeners this, right? We have 30% of your paycheck. So 30% of your paycheck goes to the government, state government, federal government, whatever. It's an average of 30%. So you give them 30%. You pay property tax, you pay gas tax, you pay tax on food, you pay all these taxes. As a business owner, as a small business owner or a business owner, you have to collect taxes for the government on those products that you sell. You then have to take that taxes and you have to send it to the government. Now, you can't opt out of that. You can't say, hey, look, I'm not collecting taxes for the government. You need to collect your own taxes. So, and businesses don't get paid to do that.
Don't go too far. Don't go too far.
Listen to me. Listen to me. We're going to go. Don't interrupt me. So we pay all of these taxes. Businesses are set up as tax bibs, right? Then the government comes in and says, oh, I need to hire 10 more people, 12 more people, 15 more people. I need this person to just do one thing, and that's just walk this can from this side of the room to this side of the room. You have laws that are put on the books that prohibit people in your community from protecting your community. You have laws on the books that basically make it more difficult, as this one does, for anyone to be able to watch that process, right? If you just go down the line, you put all of this together, the whole concept of the people, for the people, by the people, it's all BS. It's all crap. We're all sharecroppers. And if you work for the government, you're a part of their tribe, right? And you get to press down on the community any way you want. And we tolerate it. Max, I'm getting to the point where I go, why are we tolerating it? Why are we acting like we got a small string tied around our leg or our arm, tied to a fence that's barely in the ground, and we do nothing about it? We sit around and go, yeah, there's nothing I can do about it. I have to continue to do it.
That's why we're focusing on this, because the media isn't actually going into how the state Supreme Court is rationalizing this.
Right.
Like that first question, they said, because the Republicans' argument is actually valid, we interpret it to be two competing valid arguments, which means it's ambiguous, which means we get to decide what we want. The next one, which we're going to look at, the challenge over the deadline, over you have to submit your vote. I mean, this is how crazy we're talking. There's an election day. There's a time at which the polls close. That time changes from state to state, but there's a set time in which the polls close. Now, sometimes those hours can get extended if there's a really long line or if there's a snowstorm or something like that, but there's a set time on a set day. Democrats are in court challenging that and saying that because of the pandemic, people need extra days to vote.
Right.
And even though it is not ambiguous at all, the state Supreme Court still found a way to overrule the deadline. Let's go ahead and put up image 5. So this is the next part of their interpretation. Oh, sorry, image 4. Put up image 4 first. Image 4, I jumped the gun a little bit. And I'll read from it. In its second count, petitioner presents this court with an as-applies challenge to the election code's deadline for receiving ballots, received by deadline, which requires mail-in and absentee ballots to be returned to boards no later than 8 p.m. on Election Day. It contends, and that's the liberal organizations challenging this, it contends that strict enforcement of this deadline in light of the current COVID-19 pandemic and alleged delays in mail delivery by the USPS will result in extensive voter disenfranchisement in violation of the Pennsylvania Constitution's Free and Equal Elections Clause. Think about that, folks. There's a deadline. There's an election day, and there's an election hour at which the polls close. And Democrats are in court saying that because of the Postal Service delays and because of a virus, that statutory language violates the Constitution, even though in every other election past doesn't violate it. They're saying in this specific instance, it does. And then when you shoot to image 5, the Supreme Court admits that there isn't anything ambiguous. Unlike other provisions of Act 77 currently before this court, we are not asked to interpret the statutory language establishing the receipt by deadline for mail-in ballots. Indeed, there is no ambiguity regarding the deadline set by the General Assembly. Deadline, except as provided in another area of the law, relating to receipt of voted ballot, a completed mail-in ballot must be received in the office of the County Board of Elections no later than 8 o'clock p.m. on the day of the primary or election. They admit that there's no ambiguity. And the interesting thing about that law... You cannot legislate through the court system. It goes against the Constitution. You can't. Well, I mean, that ruling by itself is... I just don't understand why they don't walk it up to the U.S. Supreme Court and say, look, we need this to be heard immediately, right? Yeah. And have the U.S. Supreme Court at least... And again, I'm not a legal scholar, but maybe someone who's a lawyer can actually call, at least question the validity of the ruling and saying, hey, listen, you cannot legislate through the judicial branch. It's not possible. Yeah. Right? And stop it. Like put a stay or put some sort of handcuffs on the Pennsylvania. The amazing thing about this is that in the first part that we dealt with, they said that, the law is ambiguous. It doesn't say where you have to turn a ballot. So we hold that because it doesn't say it has to actually be in office, we hold that they can basically put drop boxes wherever they want. But as we just covered, let's go ahead and put that up again, Mr. Producer, image 5. The next section of the law says that a completed mail-in ballot must be received in the office of the County Board of Elections, no later than 8 o'clock p.m. on the day of the primary. In the office, something that looks like a USPS public mailbox, a little drop box, is not an office. So they're rewriting the statute to say, well, one part of the law is ambiguous, so we interpret a location to be anywhere. But it also says it has to be by 8 p.m. in an office. So even if you dropped it in a drop box, unless that drop box gets brought to the office by 8 p.m., the statute says nothing in that drop box is valid because that drop box cannot be an office. It can be a box. It can be a location. It cannot be an office. There is no ambiguity here. 100%. None whatsoever. And yet the Supreme Court found a way to get around that. Let's go ahead and put up image 6. The application of the statutory language to the facts of the current unprecedented situation results in an as-applied infringement of electors' right to vote. In considering this issue, we reiterate that the Free and Equal Elections Clause of the Pennsylvania Constitution requires that, quote, all aspects of the electoral process to the greatest degree possible be kept open and unrestricted to the voters of our Commonwealth, and also conducted in a manner which guarantees to the greatest degree possible a voter's right to equal participation in the electoral process for the selection of his or her representatives in government. Nevertheless, we also recognize that, quote, the state may enact substantial regulation containing reasonable, non-discriminatory restrictions to ensure honest and fair elections that proceed in an orderly and efficient manner, end quote. As we have recently seen, an orderly and efficient election process can be crucial to the protection of a voter's participation in that process. Indeed, the struggles of our most populous counties to avoid disenfranchising voters while processing the overwhelming number of pandemic-fueled mail-in ballot applications during the 2020 primary demonstrates that orderly and efficient election processes are essential to safeguarding the right to vote. An elector cannot exercise the franchise while her ballot application is awaiting processing in a county election board, nor when her ballot is sitting in a USPS facility after the deadline for ballots has already passed. It gets worse. Put up image 7. Nevertheless, we find the Commonwealth Court's rationale germane to the current challenge to the application of the ballot received by deadline. In that case, the court recognized that while neither the Constitution nor the Election Code specified, quote, any procedure to follow when a natural disaster creates an emergency situation that interferes with an election, end quote, courts could look to the direction of another law. As noted, Section 3046 provides courts a common pleas the power on the day of an election to decide matters pertaining to the election as may be necessary to carry out the intent of the election code, which the Commonwealth Court properly deemed to include providing, quote, an equal opportunity for all eligible electors to participate in the election process, end quote, which in that case necessitated delaying the election during a flood. We have no hesitation in concluding that the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic equates to a natural disaster.
Oh my gosh.
Moreover, the effects of the pandemic threatened the disenfranchisement of thousands of Pennsylvanians during the 2020 primary, when several of the Commonwealth's county election boards struggled to process the flow of mail-in ballot applications for voters who sought to avoid exposure to the virus. So the way they're getting around the statutory deadline, you have to hand it into an office by 8 p.m. on Election Day. The way they're getting around that is declaring a virus to be a natural disaster, saying, okay, well, in this election, we extended the deadline because there was a flood and people couldn't actually reach. They physically couldn't reach the polling place. They're equating that to people deciding that they don't want to reach the polling place. Because if we're being honest, I support everyone's ability to vote early if they are sick or if they can't make it, right? That's absentee voting. That's fine. But there are a whole swath of people that just don't want to go. They say, oh, there's a respiratory virus out there, which means I shouldn't have to vote in person, which means you should bend over backwards to let me fill out an application at 7:59 p.m. and accept it. They are redefining a virus as a natural disaster to get around a statute that the Supreme Court admits is unambiguous. So what did they do, Joe? They extended the deadline from Tuesday at 8 p.m. to Friday at 8 p.m., meaning you now have an extra 3 days in Pennsylvania to submit your ballot. The election day will end on November 3rd at 8 p.m. Yeah. But the final Democrat vote will be counted on the Friday, because we know that Democrats use mail-in voting far more than Republicans. So the last Democrat vote will be counted 3 days later.
So are we going to make sure that we have people that are watching look, it comes down to this. I think the next mobilization that has to happen across the country in places like Pennsylvania is finding people, mobilizing people that actually can watch with a video camera every single one of these places, right? This has to be a mobilization that happens. They're not going to be anticipating it. They're not going to actually think that we could actually get it done, but we need to get it done, right? We actually need to be right there watching the entire process. It's the only way that we can have at least a somewhat fair outcome within this environment. Now, I still think that this is just my opinion, and I hope I'm right. I think we're going to have a waterfall effect. I think that not since the Reagan re-election has there been such an overwhelming waterfall effect of a president winning. I think that President Trump is going to win in a landslide. That's what I think.
We just got KT wrote on our comment page that she cannot share this because Facebook has determined that this goes against their community guidelines. Our podcast today.
What?
That this goes against it because we use the title "Democrats Stealing Pennsylvania Election," which is what this is. When you're trying to change the deadline to submit a ballot, people are saying that they cannot hit the share button because this goes against Facebook's terms of service, which apparently is you cannot question the orthodoxy. We'd be perfectly fine, apparently, to say we support this state Supreme Court position. You are not allowed to say we oppose this state Supreme Court decision.
We're in the process of salting data and information so that we can actually have a lawsuit. We don't believe that what the Facebook has done is legal. We don't believe that this weaponization of technology, which they've obviously done, is legal. We don't believe that this foreign interests, and by the way, Facebook has tens of thousands, if not more, people that live in places like India and Bangladesh and things like that. That's true. That are actually over there monitoring this. This isn't just people here in the United States that are monitoring it. They have people in foreign countries that are monitoring, saying you can't actually have this, you can't share this information. We have foreign interests that are actually interfering with what we do in the U.S. So we are in the process of a lawsuit. We are going to take it as far as we can, as far as necessary. And frankly, it's appalling. It makes me sick that just the institution of our country is being violated by big tech companies that seem to all collaborate and stick together. I don't know how, again, I'm going to say it again. I don't know how the average American person does not stand together, right? Just ignore all the other stuff. Just stand together and say, hey, listen, at some point we have to find other alternatives for leadership in government and even in our court system, because it's obviously broke. It is absolutely broken in its current form.
And I'll mention again, people are asking if Facebook shuts this down, where can we connect? We do have a link in our description for you to join our email newsletter, which is where we will be able to spread the word on where we will go next if Facebook decides to shut down our page. So make sure that you subscribe to our email newsletter. We also send out action alerts on things going on in DC that need your attention. But join that email newsletter so we can keep you up to date. We're also on YouTube, link in the description, and we're on Parler if you use that as well.
So, and we will be dropping a funding deal out there in order to sue for some of these lawsuits. And we've got a couple of organizations across the country that have said that they'd stand up and help us with that. We also have a couple of organizations that are going to join these lawsuits. So we're doing things on our side in order to make sure that we get an opportunity to make sure the lawsuit can get all the way through the process. But I mean, frankly, I think that there's a huge problem with what Facebook is doing, what Twitter is doing, and what these big progressive loony left organizations are doing. And by the way, this has been going on for years. I mean, they've been literally suppressing voices for years. They're indoctrinating people when they don't let you share information, which, by the way, is true. We're not saying anything that's not true. They're legislating through the judicial branch. They're doing that, right? And for you, the little guy over in Bangladesh or India or wherever you are that is stopping people from actually sharing it, yeah, don't worry. We're coming for you, because the American people are tired of it. They're tired of this outside interference. They're tired of big tech actually weaponizing themselves against the American people. We're tired. We're tired. Now, I got to tell you, Max, here's my biggest concern. We're going to get to November 4th, right? And President Trump, God willing, wins. And by the way, pray, people. Pray. Like, don't just let it just fall in the hands of, I hope everyone shows up. Hope is not a strategy. Prayer is a strategy, right? And then make sure you go vote. But when on November 4th, I'm just going to tell everyone that's listening, there's a couple things that I want you to do. One, I want you to be prepared. So I want you to make sure that if it's legal in your household to own a gun and to have ammo, own a gun and have ammo. Protect your family. Number two, make sure that you have basic necessities, at least 30 days worth of food. If you have to, just go buy big bags of rice, go buy big bags of grain, right? Frozen foods. Those are necessities. I'm going to tell you right now, just have it. And you'd say, well, Joe, maybe something doesn't happen. Maybe it does happen. Well, if it does happen, it's better to be prepared when you're dealing with the lunatics that we're dealing with today in our country, this socialist, Marxist, communist regime. So make sure you do that. The third thing that I think you need to do is, if you have the ability, make sure that you are, number one, you're storing water and food, right? So make sure you have some other food, water as well. The third thing is some sort of generator to make sure that you don't have spoilage issues with your food, right? Those are the three things, no matter where you are, I'm going to tell you to do, right? Those three things.
So I want to talk about this because we're talking about Facebook. Mm-hmm. We put up a post, Mr. Producer, let's go to my screen. We put up a post earlier in the week. Lots of people probably saw this. On it, you can see that CBS Evening News is running a chyron. And in that chyron, the chyron is basically the text at the bottom of the screen. Breaking news, Biden pitches crucial Latino voters during Florida campaign stop. But if you look at the picture that they were showing on the screen, it was a Trump rally. Because people have hats on that say, Make America Great Again, 4 more years. I heart Trump. I heart Trump. So we put out a post that said CBS used a photo of a Latinos for Trump event in Arizona as a stand-in for Joe Biden's Latinos Roundtable event in Florida. That is absolutely true. They have a chyron that says it's Joe Biden's pitch at a Florida campaign stop.
Right.
It was not. It was in Arizona. Why is my page going up and down? It was an Arizona thing, and we got fact checked, and I'll show you what they actually said. The hats in the picture that CBS seems to have tried to pass off as a Biden event literally say, "I heart Trump." Why would they do such a thing? Possibly because they didn't want to actually show people what Joe Biden's Latino roundtable actually looked like. And you can see I included the picture below it, which is that. That's what Joe Biden's Latino roundtable actually looked like. 5 people. They had individual chairs set up with like 15 feet in between each chairs. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's campaign event in a completely different state, raucous. We got fact-checked. Let's see why. Independent fact checker, our good friends at Lead Stories, fact check, CBS News did not use a photo from a Trump rally for Latinos and show it as a Biden rally. Even though the chyron, what they actually wrote in it, that's what it is. Listen, you can't do that. You can't show a picture of one thing and then have text describing it as something else. But this is what really gets me. We were labeled as false. There's different degrees of a Facebook fact check. False is the worst. We were labeled as false. If you actually click on this, we're going to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. They didn't actually originally fact check us. They fact checked originally another post that made different claims. When you click on that post, they've deleted it. They've deleted the text. But how were they rated? They were rated as partly false. This is the first time I've seen something like this, where they deleted their text so you actually can't see what they wrote because I guess they didn't want to keep it up. Never do that. If anyone ever fact checks you, never delete it because then you can't fight it.
Why don't we actually contact Petita Pavana and actually find out what it is and ask for that post? Why don't we go that far?
Regardless of what it is, they were rated as partly false. We were rated as false.
Hey, let's go
It's the
back
first time
to
I've ever
Lead
actually
Stories.
seen this.
There's an email address. Maybe we could just have all of our people here email.
We don't want to share that because then we'll be accused of sending people on a doxing campaign.
That's not doxing. It's a lead story place. It's a place.
We cannot share an email. We will be taken down immediately. But what I can tell you is that their domain name is leadstories.com, and it is very easy to find an email if you want to respectfully let them know what you think about their fact checks. Because every month they hit us with something, and what they argue is that, yes, even though CBS showed an image of a Trump rally and put text on the screen.
Picture. That's the picture right there.
Yeah. So even though CBS put up an image of a Trump rally, even though CBS put up text saying Biden pitches crucial Latino voters during Florida campaign stop, they say it's false to complain about that because at that moment, briefly, they had started talking a little bit about Donald Trump's efforts to woo Hispanics. So even though the chyron was completely inaccurate to the picture being shown on the screen, they say that because the CBS anchor mentioned Trump at that moment, it is not fake news, and it's fake news to call it fake news. So go ahead and take that off the screen.
I actually wonder if through this process we'll be able to sue Lead Stories, right? And I don't even think that Lead Stories understands what kind of organization we are, right? They think it's just this itty bitty organization. We're not an itty bitty company at all, right? We're not even nearly an itty bitty company. Now we're self-funded in everything that we do. We don't take any money out of Conservative Daily. Everything we do is just reinvested into what we do and creating new technology on the Conservative Daily side. But I'm not sure that they understand how big of an organization we are. Matter of fact, I'm not sure they understand what our reach is collectively with all the organizations we represent. So it's going to be interesting. I think that's one of the things that I'm going to bring out, Max, is can we actually sue Lead Stories because it actually is harming us, right? Well, it's actually harming us, and what they're doing is personal attacks. I don't know if we can or not, but I plan on finding out.
It's interesting because they have the person they have fact-checking us, the same person, we don't have to put her up again, I don't want to dox her, Alexis, the same one we complain about every time, a journalist who spent over a decade breaking celebrity scoop with Radar Online and US Weekly. We have an entertainment reporter. She has an IMDb page where she goes on TV talking about the royal family. And that's who has fact-checked us on issues revolving the United Nations, right? Involving whether or not it's justified for CBS to show a picture of a Trump rally and have text saying it's a Biden rally. I mean, that's what we're dealing with, folks. So I'll say it again, hit that share button. Make sure you like the video, comment on YouTube. Make sure you hit the like button, the thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. And also, I left a link in the bottom of our Facebook, and I'll put it on YouTube too. If you like the show, I have to make sure I preface it that way. If you like the show and you have an iPhone, please consider going to our Apple Podcast page and to give us a 5-star review and to write a little bit about why you like the show.
If you like it.
We're getting hit.
If you don't like it, hey, so Talk says, I think this entertainment reporter has a crush on you, Max.
She might. It might be personal.
Like it might be.
It might be personal, but I mean, it's like clockwork, Joe. It's every month, and I want to get back to the Supreme Court because we have to talk about more. But it really is every month.
It is
like that. Right as we start coming out of the last fact check, which anyone doesn't know, when they fact check you, your reach of your page, which is how many people actually see what you do on Facebook, declines. And after a certain amount of time, it goes back to normal. And whenever we get back to normal, we get hit with another fact check. So it really is on a monthly basis that they're just coming and trying to suppress it. And it makes you wonder. It doesn't even make you wonder. You know it's political. You absolutely know it's political. So we got to finish off this Supreme Court because there's more that they talked about. Let's go ahead and put up image 8. This is the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. This is talking about whether or not a ballot should need a postmark. And this is a footnote talking about one of the plaintiffs, one of the claimants. And the Supreme Court explains, she specifically recommends that the court, quote, order that ballots mailed by voters by 8 p.m. on Election Day be counted if they are otherwise valid and received by the county boards of elections by November 6th. Ballots received within this period that lack a postmark or other proof of mailing, or for which the postmark or other proof of mailing is illegible, should enjoy a presumption that they were mailed by Election Day.
Wow.
A presumption. Think about that. We can go ahead and take that off the screen. That's what they're arguing, that that not only should they be allowed to receive ballots 3 days later, but if the ballot doesn't have a postmark, that it should be presumed to have been mailed on time. And the Supreme Court agreed with it. Let's put up image 9. This is their explanation. We at the Supreme Court likewise incorporate the Secretary's recommendation addressing ballots received within this period between November 3rd and November 6th that lack a postmark or other proof of mailing, or for which the postmark or other proof of mailing is illegible. Accordingly, in such cases, we conclude that a ballot received on or before 5 p.m. on November 6, 2020, will be presumed to have been mailed by Election Day unless a preponderance of the evidence demonstrates that it was mailed after Election Day. So what does that mean? If you find a way to slip a bunch of sealed ballots into the bag of the mail carrier, right? The mail carrier in his bag has you're able to slip ballots in there. Let's just say hypothetically, you slip the ballots in there. The mail carrier then goes to the county office and delivers all of the ballots in their bag. And you find that some of them have no postmark at all. No postmark at all, proving that they were mailed before Election Day. What the state Supreme Court in Pennsylvania just said is that you have to presume that they were, unless the preponderance of the evidence demonstrates that it was mailed after Election Day. So instead of having to prove that it was mailed when it was, it's up to the other side challenging to prove that it wasn't. So literally, anyone can just, it's very easy to do this, right? It's very easy to do this. It's not hard. I just gave you one hypothetical for a ballot to reach an office after Election Day and for it to be presumed that it was mailed correctly. I mean, this is insane, folks. This is absolutely insane. And that's why I can't stand Facebook for saying we're lying, because this is opening the door to literal election theft.
But they don't. But if it went the other way, they wouldn't be saying this. And this is again what you said before. Everything that they stand for is actually the opposite of what they really want. They don't want equality. Democrats don't want equality, right? They don't want justice. Right? Where's justice for the little kids? I don't know if you actually saw this, but you know that the Cheers director in LA.
I saw that.
Did you hear about that?
Well, he was a child actor, right?
Yeah.
And he's now been arrested for child pornography.
Yeah, federal charges for child pornography.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah,
absolutely crazy.
And it keeps happening. The Democrats are a bunch of pedophiles, rapists, and closet racists. Right? They want to steal elections. They want to turn us into a socialist society. And guys, just so you know, do you know who actually ends up on top? You know who has opportunity and wealth in a socialist or communist society? You know how many people get to own a nice house and a nice car?
Very, very few.
Very few. Just the government structure, that caste system, they're it. Everyone else, they get to decide what you have. They get to take it from you at any time.
I will mention,
you can have a store in that environment? What?
I will mention that one of the most repeated complaints on our Apple Podcast review page is that you keep calling Democrats rapists, pedophiles, and racists.
I don't care. They are.
Do not like the trolls. Do not like it.
I don't care.
So
they are. They're pedophiles, rapists, and
racists. If you guys listening like our show, again, make sure you use that link and leave us if you like it, a good review. And type a couple of sentences explaining why you like the show.
Why do they keep raping children and women? Why? Why do they keep being caught in pedophilia rings? You say, oh, well, there's some Republicans too. Really? Not billionaires. All the billionaires that are funding these elections that are pedophiles, all of them are Democrats. I haven't seen one yet that's a Republican or a conservative. I haven't. And I'm not telling you that people can't fall from grace. I'm not telling you that people can't make mistakes. That's not what I'm saying. But it is habitual. It happens over and over. Wiener, right? The guy in New York City, married to...
I thought you were just going on a completely different tangent.
No, but Wiener...
When you said that, I didn't know you were just saying Wiener as a name.
Yeah, Wiener. Wiener. All right, so Wiener, the guy, he got caught sending pictures to an underage girl, right?
And in the process, they discovered Hillary Clinton's missing emails.
Yeah.
And in the process, they found Hillary Clinton's missing emails.
Yeah.
Imagine that. You're investigating a guy hitting on children. And what do you find? Missing Clinton emails.
Yeah. It just shows you just how corrupt they are. When I was in Washington last week and I was meeting with, and I said this before, meeting with the lobbyist groups, I was meeting with Democrats and Republican leadership. It is overwhelmingly obvious that the Democrats are paranoid because they're doing so many mischievous, bad, corrupt things that it's easy to get caught. Yeah. So they don't want you to record a call. They don't want you to have. They're very careful where they'll talk down into their hands so you can't actually record the conversation. You can't read their lips. Can't do any of that stuff. Right? This is how they think. I mean, literally, it is a deliberate attempt to steal our country, to take everything that we've fought for the last 250 years. It's sad. It's sad that we actually haven't even gotten to the point now where we're not openly punching them in the mouth, right? We let them terrorize our communities, but we don't frankly meet them there, which we're starting to, and we need to do more. We need to meet them there. Yeah. Like if they go low, we go low with them, right?
So let's go ahead and wrap the Supreme Court discussion up because we've covered the bits. Mr. Producer, let's go to my screen. Easier to probably finish it up this way. This is the conclusion from the state Supreme Court. Quote, based on our disposition of all of the claims set forth above, we grant relief on the claims set forth in counts 1, 2, and 5 of the Democratic Party's petition for review as follows, and hold that count 1, the election code permits county boards of election to collect hand-delivered mail-in ballots at locations other than their office addresses, including drop boxes as indicated herein. Count 2, a 3-day extension of the absentee and mail-in ballot received by deadline is adopted such that ballots mailed by voters via the United States Postal Service and postmarked by 8 p.m. on Election Day, November 3rd, shall be counted if they are otherwise valid and received by the county boards of election on or before 5 p.m. on November 6th. Ballots received within this period that lack a postmark or other proof of mailing, or for which the postmark or other proof of mailing is illegible, will be presumed to have been mailed by Election Day unless a preponderance of the evidence demonstrates that it is mailed after Election Day. Count 5, the poll watcher residency requirement set forth in the election code is constitutional, and for the reasons set forth herein, we deny relief sought in count 3 and 4 of the petition for review. That is a majority Democrat Supreme Court. We can go ahead and take that off the screen. A majority Democrat Supreme Court. They hold a 5-2 majority over Republicans. They're not nonpartisan. There are Democrats and there are Republicans. Just approved the Democrat Party's request to have the election extended for mail-in ballots and to allow anyone to slip a ballot into the office in the 3 days after the election, and you have to presume that it was mailed on time, even if there isn't even a postmark. Like, that's how radical this is. It's not like it has to be postmarked before the date. They're saying you have to count the ballot unless you can prove it was fraudulent.
How are you going to watch it for 3 days? How are you going to watch the thing for 3 days? I mean, they could be out there just harvesting ballots all day long from the third. Okay, we need 2,000 ballots. We need 3,000 ballots. We need 5,000 ballots. We need 10,000 ballots. They literally can go out there and just harvest ballots.
Yeah.
They can actually do that.
What I didn't mention is another part of the ruling.
We're headed towards a civil war.
Another part of the ruling states that signatures do not need to match up anymore. That's something Democrats have been pushing hard for. If you are receiving the ballot and it's obvious that the signatures don't match up, you're not allowed to toss it out in Pennsylvania anymore. That was the last bulwark to protect against election fraud, making sure the voter is who he says or is who she says they are. And they're not letting you toss out a ballot for a bad signature either. So they no actual security in signature verification, no requirement that it actually be submitted by election day, no requirement that it even be postmarked. That's why we titled this, "They're Stealing the Election." Because people do not do this. People do not try and get an extra 3 days to receive votes and claim that the pandemic is a natural disaster akin to a flood that literally blocks you from going to the polls. People don't do this because they want a free and fair election. They do this because they're afraid of the results. They're afraid of the results.
And that should scare you. That should scare you because that means the small minority is trying to overtake the majority. They're trying to force us into an environment, right? This is foreign interest, guys. It's foreign interest. You say what you want, it's foreign interest. And we're allowing it to happen. We're allowing it. And if you sit down, you know, we had an FEC meeting last night. We had, 300 people show up to that. It's a pretty interesting meeting. It was, again, more of the, hey, what are we going to do? It's an action-based environment. And so Brad, one of the people that's within the FEC environment for one of the chapters, stands up and does a voting deal, and he says, hey, okay, who's your president, who's your vice president, or excuse me, who's your senator, who's your Republican, and everyone stands up. And as you can't answer the question, you sit down. And then he says at the very end, because by this time, who's your precinct leader, who are the people in positions of authority? By the time he was done going through all the way just to the county level within your state, there was no one standing up anymore. Actually, there was one or two people, but they were precinct leaders. And he said the reason why, if you're wondering why the country is going the direction it's going in the direction it's going because you're all sitting on your butts. That's why it's going the direction it's going. So I'm going to tell everyone that's listening that your obligation to your country is to not just vote. Your obligation is to get involved. And as we start going through, we are going to have a meeting where we talk, a show where we walk through everything FEC, right? Everything FEC United. That'll probably happen in the next couple of weeks. But you have an obligation to pay attention, right? I work 50 hours a week. Okay. Well, I work 80. Now what? I mean, we could always one up each other. I have 3 kids. I have 4 kids. I have to work 2 jobs.
But that's not what it's all about. It's not about one upping people.
You contribute what you can, right? But contribute something. Contribute 3 hours a week, 5 hours a week. Walk with candidates. Get involved in the Trump campaign.
Well, you see what happened in Minnesota? The kid got shot and killed.
Yeah. Yeah,
he was volunteering for the Republican opposing Ilhan Omar.
Yeah.
2 of them were standing outside a convenience store, and there was a drive-by shooting. And they're saying, oh, it was not political. Just like they said it wasn't political when the black Trump supporter got assassinated in the street. Not political.
Well, I'm going to tell you.
What you hear in Minnesota.
I'm going to tell you that I'm not going to tell you, actually. I wanted to tell you, but I've been told not to, so I'm not going to. The left is evil. I mean, I'm going to call it what it is. Pedophiles, rapists, closet racists. That's what they are. And if you're not, and you still are with the Democrats, you're a problem because you're complicit in that behavior. You got to decide. You have to decide. You know, the Republicans, the right has a 1%, a 2% problem. The Democrats have a 60, 70% problem, right? I'm sorry, it does. So you choose. You choose what the best candidate is. And I don't even know how it could even be if you're on the left, it could even be a thought in your mind that, okay, I'm not voting for President Trump. I can't vote for President Trump. If you can't vote for President Trump, you're not paying attention, right? And you actually just want to commit suicide because that's what you're doing. You're committing suicide for the United States of America.
That's not described in those terms.
No, it is. It's suicide for our nation. It absolutely is. How do you say it's not, Max? How can we say it's not?
Let's not just describe it as if people don't vote for someone that we like, that it's akin to them committing suicide.
It's not someone that I like.
That
has nothing to do with what I like.
There's more sensitive ways to people who have had family members who commit suicide.
How much have we dealt with? How much have we dealt with? Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I'm not going to sit here and tell people that it's going to be okay. If Biden and Harris get into office, it's not going to be okay. It's not. And on November 4th or 5th or 6th or 8th or 10th or 12th or whatever, because they're not going to actually walk away from this election. But if it goes a week later, we're going to have civil unrest like we've never seen before in this country. It's going to happen. We're in the middle of a civil war now.
Are planning for it. Yeah. Democrats are planning for Donald Trump to win on Election Day and Joe Biden to win once all the mail-in votes are counted. That's what they're planning for.
Just so you know, 100 days of just absolute riots in Oregon, right? In Portland. Right?
That's a lot.
And then it just stopped. Yeah. It just stopped. Why? Guys,
well, Nancy Pelosi came out yesterday and said no more.
Oh, so yeah. So now you have a talking head. Oh, that's right. Okay, maybe the talking head, maybe the person that actually sat on the top of Antifa was Nancy Pelosi. Maybe. I mean, I had an anonymous source that actually gave me that information that said she was the head of the Antifa. Maybe it was. I mean, it's just an anonymous source. So can't say who the source is, but they're anonymous. But maybe Nancy Pelosi runs the Antifa, right? And BLM is a Marxist communist organization. What they're doing in Pennsylvania is the slippery slope of what they're going to do across the entire country.
Yeah.
Right. And here's my fear. My fear is that we're going to get to November 4th, and a lot of people are going to die. And frankly, people on the right, we're very well armed. But I think the left has spent a lot of time over the last couple of months getting armed. Right. I think we're headed towards a civil war. I think that it's an inevitable. It's the inevitability of that is already in concrete. But if we don't start shutting them down in every environment and talking sensibly and stopping this indoctrination in education, if we don't start paying attention, if we don't start getting out there and spending 6, 7, 8, 10 hours a month getting involved as parents, as people in the community, if we don't do that, if we don't start standing together and ignoring some of the rhetoric we're hearing from this loony left and that 1% loony right? Because, you know, I have no place in my heart for any racist. I don't care what political party you say you're a part of, right? And get to a place where we can actually hold people accountable in our community. If we don't get there, and we don't get there quickly, our country is doomed. It's doomed.
Yeah, which is why we're focusing on this today, talking about the actual state Supreme Court case, because the media isn't explaining the actual details of it.
Not even Fox News.
They're not explaining that a majority Democrat Supreme Court reclassified a virus as a flood to let them extend Election Day 3 days, and then allowing you to vote even if you don't even have a postmark to prove that you mailed it. You have to assume it was mailed. Really, really scary stuff. I mean, the postmark was supposed to be the most foolproof way of deciding, right? It has to go through, because that's mail fraud at that point. That's a felony. When you do that, that's like a really big deal, committing mail fraud, if you were to apply false postmarks to things. But now they're saying you don't even need that postmark. Again, I will say the only reason to get rid of these protections, the only reason, is to make it easier for fraudulent votes to slip through. You cannot say you want a fair election with no illegal voting and simultaneously want to get rid of all of the safeguards against illegal voting. It's just not possible. You can't square that circle. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the podcast.
And we're going to
we have a bunch of links.
Yeah, right after this, we're going to also live cast Trump. Right, he's speaking right now.
Yeah,
so we'll
he's speaking right now. that's going to be it for this edition of the podcast. We do have a bunch of links in our description. Please do make sure you check them out. Make sure you sign up for our email newsletter. Make sure you follow us on Parler at Conservative Daily, all one word. Be happy to follow you back. Check out our merch if you want to help support the channel. And if you like the video, make sure that you also subscribe to us by audio. We have a lot of people listening to the audio version. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Store, which is about to actually go away and become Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and Podbean. Also, don't forget to like and follow our Facebook page, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you like the podcast, you haven't already, make sure that you like and share the Facebook stream. Also, make sure that you hit the thumbs up on YouTube, and then hit the subscribe and the bell for notification buttons. I think I got through everything. So again, my name is Max McGuire.
This is Joe Otto.
And remember that the fight to take back our country isn't over, but the only way we win is if we all stand and fight together.